Captain Maya Johnson stood tall, her polished boots clicking against the tiled floor of the bustling airport. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large glass windows, casting golden streaks across the terminal. She adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag over her shoulder and took a deep breath. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life, a short trip home to celebrate her son's high school graduation. After 20 years of dedicated service in the U.S. Air Force, she had earned this moment. Her uniform, adorned with medals and ribbons that told stories of courage and sacrifice, made heads turn as she walked past travelers rushing to their gates. But something about today felt different. As Maya approached the security checkpoint, she noticed the usual hum of activity seemed louder, more chaotic. Families argued over misplaced tickets, children whined about long lines, and TSA agents barked instructions into handheld radios. Still, Maya remained calm. She had been through countless airports before, navigating tight schedules and strict protocols without issue. Today would be no exception, or so she thought. When it was her turn to step forward, Maya handed her ID and boarding pass to the agent stationed at the initial screening desk. The young man barely glanced at her face before raising an eyebrow. "You're military?" he asked, his tone skeptical rather than respectful. "Yes," Maya replied evenly, meeting his gaze. "I'm a senior officer in the U.S. Air Force." The agent flipped through her documents again, frowning slightly. Then, without explanation, he gestured for another TSA official to join him. A middle-aged woman appeared, clipboard in hand, eyeing Maya's uniform with suspicion. "We'll need to conduct additional screening," she announced flatly. Maya blinked, caught off guard. "Is there a problem?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everything appears to be in order." "There's no problem, ma'am," the woman responded, though her tight smile suggested otherwise. "It's just standard procedure." Standard procedure? Maya had heard those words many times before, often used as a catch-all excuse for unnecessary scrutiny. But this time it stung more than usual. She glanced around, noticing other passengers breezing through security with ease. Why was she being singled out? Was it because of her race, her gender, or both? Reluctantly, Maya followed the agents to a nearby area designated for secondary inspections. They instructed her to place her belongings on the table, spreading them out item by item. Her laptop, toiletries, even personal photos were subjected to meticulous examination. Each movement felt invasive, each question redundant. "Do you have any liquids exceeding the allowed limit?" one agent asked, despite clearly seeing her travel-sized shampoo bottles already sealed in a plastic bag. Another prodded her luggage, searching for what exactly? Maya wasn't sure anymore. As the minutes dragged on, frustration began bubbling inside her chest. She tried reasoning with the agents, explaining her position and rank. "I've served my country for 2 decades, she said firmly. "These screenings are typically reserved for individuals flagged for specific reasons. I assure you I pose no threat." Her words fell on deaf ears. Instead, the agents grew colder, their demeanor shifting from indifferent to almost hostile. One of them muttered under his breath, loud enough for Maya to hear, "Well, rules are rules." Passengers waiting in line started to take notice. Some craned their necks to get a better view of the unfolding scene, while others whispered among themselves. A few pulled out their phones, discreetly filming the interaction. Maya could feel their eyes on her, curious, judgmental, sympathetic, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the growing humiliation swelling within her. Here she was, a decorated officer who had risked her life for her nation, reduced to standing like a suspect in front of strangers. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every second ticked by with excruciating slowness. Maya clenched her fists, willing herself to stay composed. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. It might even make things worse. Yet the injustice of it all gnawed at her resolve. How could this be happening? Hadn't she earned the right to basic respect after everything she'd done? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the agents stepped back and crossed his arms. "Ma'am," he began, his tone clipped, "we regret to inform you that you won't be allowed to board your flight today." Maya froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean?" she demanded, incredulous. "I haven't broken any laws. My credentials are valid. My ticket is confirmed. What possible reason could you have for stopping me?" The agent hesitated, glancing at his colleague for support. When neither offered a clear answer, Maya realized the truth. There was no legitimate reason. This wasn't about safety or protocol. It was about prejudice masquerading as policy. And in that moment, anger surged through her veins, hotter and fiercer than ever before. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to expose the absurdity of the situation. But instead, she forced herself to breathe deeply, channeling her emotions into determination. If they thought they could silence her, they were wrong. Very wrong. Little did anyone know, this incident was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would challenge not just Maya's patience, but also the systems designed to protect people like her. For now, though, she stood alone, staring down the agents who refused to meet her gaze. Somewhere in the distance, an announcement echoed through the terminal, reminding passengers to proceed to their gates. But Maya knew her journey had taken a detour, one that would lead her down a path she never expected to walk. The weight of the situation pressed down on Captain Maya Johnson as she stood motionless, her mind racing with unanswered questions. The TSA agent's words echoed in her ears. "You won't be allowed to board your flight today." It wasn't just the denial that stung. It was the lack of explanation, the absence of any logical reason for this treatment. Her military ID, boarding pass, and travel documents were all in perfect order, yet none of it seemed to matter. She had been stopped, searched, humiliated, and now barred from continuing her journey, all without a single clear justification. Maya's frustration mounted as the agents avoided eye contact, shuffling papers and whispering among themselves. One of them finally spoke up, his tone dismissive. "Ma'am, we need hard copies of certain documents. Digital versions aren't sufficient." "Hard copies," Maya repeated, incredulous. "Are you serious? Everything I've provided is standard practice. Most airlines accept digital documentation these days. Why are you making exceptions here?" The agent shrugged, offering no further clarification. Instead, he turned back to his clipboard, pretending to review something important. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Was this really about paperwork, or was it something deeper? She couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that her race and gender were playing a role in how she was being treated. If she were a white man in uniform, would they have subjected him to the same scrutiny? Would they have denied him entry onto his flight? Passengers continued to watch the scene unfold, some openly glaring at the TSA agents while others whispered behind cupped hands. A young mother holding her toddler's hand shook her head sympathetically as she passed by. An older gentleman muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous. She's wearing a uniform, for heaven's sake." His voice carried just enough for Maya to hear, and though she appreciated the sentiment, it did little to ease her growing anger. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her momentarily out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, a text message from her son. "Mom, are you okay? Your flight should have taken off by now. Did something happen?" The simple question sent a wave of guilt crashing over her. How could she explain this to her son? How could she tell him that after dedicating her life to serving her country, she was being treated like a criminal? Maya swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. She decided to push back harder, demanding answers. "I want to speak to a supervisor," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the murmurs around her. "Right now." The request seemed to catch the agents off guard. They exchanged uneasy glances before one of them nodded reluctantly. "We'll see what we can do," he mumbled, disappearing into the crowd. While she waited, Maya took stock of her surroundings. People moved past her in a blur, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Some looked away quickly, unwilling to acknowledge the tension in the air. Others lingered, filming the scene on their phones. Social media had become a powerful tool in recent years, and Maya knew that if this incident went viral, it could shine a spotlight on the systemic issues plaguing institutions like the TSA. But right now, She didn't care about hashtags or trending topics. All she wanted was to get on her plane and go home to her family. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. When the supervisor finally arrived, he was flanked by 2 additional TSA officials, as if preparing for a confrontation. He introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, extending a hand that Maya ignored. His demeanor was calm but distant, almost robotic. "Captain Johnson," he began, consulting a clipboard. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding your boarding process." "Confusion?" Maya echoed, her voice sharp. "Is that what you're calling this? Because from where I'm standing it looks more like discrimination." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Let me assure you, ma'am, we treat every passenger equally. However, due to heightened security measures—" "Don't give me that nonsense," Maya interrupted, her patience wearing thin. "You've singled me out based on nothing more than arbitrary rules. You haven't answered my questions and you haven't given me a valid reason for why I can't board my flight. So don't stand there and try to justify this with vague excuses." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped softly, prompting others to join in. For the first time since the ordeal began, Maya felt a flicker of solidarity. These strangers, many of whom she'd never met, were standing with her, not because they owed her anything, but because they recognized injustice when they saw it. "Mr. Thompson raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, let's keep things civil. We're simply following protocol." "And whose protocol is this?" Maya shot back. "Who decides which passengers get flagged and which ones don't? Is it based on skin color, gender, rank, or is it entirely random?" The supervisor hesitated, clearly unprepared for such direct questioning. When he finally spoke, his words lacked conviction. "As I said, we apply the same standards to everyone. Unfortunately, in your case, there were discrepancies that prevented us from allowing you to proceed." "What discrepancies?" Maya demanded. "Name them. Tell me exactly what I did wrong." Mr. Thompson opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. It was clear he had no real answers, only empty rhetoric designed to deflect responsibility. By now, the crowd had grown larger, drawing attention from other parts of the terminal. Passengers queued up at nearby gates craned their necks to see what was happening. Airline staff members hovered anxiously, unsure whether to intervene. Even children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking why the woman in the uniform was so upset. Maya realized she was at a crossroads. She could choose to accept defeat, walk away quietly, and hope for a better outcome next time, or she could fight back. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever faced similar indignities. Deep down, she knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about missing a flight anymore. It was about challenging a system that perpetuated bias and inequality, often under the guise of security. Summoning every ounce of strength, Maya addressed the crowd directly. "Does this look fair to you?" she asked, gesturing to the TSA agents and their equipment. "Does this look like justice? I've served my country for 20 years, risking my life to protect freedoms that seem to disappear the moment I step into an airport. And I'm not the only one. There are countless others who've experienced this kind of treatment, who've been made to feel less than human because of their race, their gender, or both." Her voice rose, steady and unwavering. "If we stay silent, nothing will change. But if we speak up, if we demand accountability, then maybe, just maybe, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The applause that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt. Strangers patted Maya on the shoulder, offering words of encouragement. One elderly woman handed her a tissue, tears streaming down her own face. Another man approached her, introducing himself as a lawyer. "If you need legal support," he said quietly, pressing his business card into her hand, "call me." For the first time that day, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't alone. With the eyes of the Yao nation beginning to turn toward her story, she knew she had an opportunity to spark meaningful change. As she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the checkpoint, she resolved to take this fight further, to ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had endured. The battle was far from over, but Maya Johnson was ready. The crowd around Captain Maya Johnson had grown larger, buzzing with a mix of outrage and admiration. Her impassioned speech moments earlier had struck a chord with the passengers, many of whom now stood silently watching as she faced off against the TSA supervisor, Mr. Thompson. The tension in the air was palpable, like an invisible storm brewing just beneath the surface. Maya could feel it, the weight of their collective frustration pressing down on her. But instead of crumbling under its intensity, she found strength in it. These strangers weren't merely bystanders. They were witnesses to something much bigger than one woman's ordeal. Mr. Thompson, clearly flustered by the attention, tried to regain control of the situation. "Captain Johnson," he said, his voice tinged with desperation, "I understand your concerns, but we must follow protocol. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, I can provide you with the necessary forms." "A complaint?" Maya repeated, incredulous. "You think filling out paperwork is going to fix this? You've already wasted hours of my time, insulted my integrity, and denied me access to my flight, all without providing a single valid reason. Do you really believe that a piece of paper will make any difference?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Passengers nodded in agreement, some murmuring their support while others openly criticized the TSA agents. A teenage girl holding a smartphone shouted, "This is messed up. She's done nothing wrong." Her comment ignited a ripple of cheers from the crowd, further unsettling the already uneasy officials. Maya took a step forward, her posture commanding yet composed. "If you won't give me answers here, then let's take this conversation somewhere else," she said firmly. "Call someone higher up, someone who actually has the authority to explain why I'm being treated this way." Mr. Thompson hesitated, glancing nervously at his colleagues. It was clear he wasn't prepared for such bold defiance. After a moment of deliberation, he reluctantly agreed. "Fine," he muttered, pulling out his radio. "Let me contact our regional director." As he stepped aside to make the call, Maya turned to face the growing audience. For the first time since the incident began, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge their presence. They weren't just random travelers anymore. They were allies. Their eyes reflected anger, empathy, and determination, mirroring her own emotions. One man approached her cautiously, his hands clasped tightly together. He introduced himself as Marcus, a retired police officer. "Ma'am," he said earnestly, "if you need anything, a lawyer, media coverage, whatever, I know people who can help." Maya thanked him warmly, touched by his sincerity. Another woman handed her a business card, identifying herself as Sarah, a journalist covering human interest stories. "Your story deserves to be told," Sarah said quietly. "If you're willing, I'd like to write about this, not just for you, but for everyone who's been treated unfairly because of who they are." For a brief moment, Maya felt overwhelmed. This was no longer just about missing her son's graduation or dealing with bureaucratic incompetence. It was about standing up for justice not only for herself, but for countless others who might never have the platform to speak out. She nodded at Sarah, accepting the offer. "Thank you," she said simply. "But this isn't over yet. We'll see where it goes." By now, news of the confrontation had spread beyond the immediate vicinity. Other travelers waiting at nearby gates joined the gathering, curious to learn what was happening. Some recorded videos on their phones capturing every word and gesture. Social media platforms lit up with posts and hashtags like "Stand with Maya" and "Justice for Black Women." Within minutes, snippets of the incident went viral, drawing attention from activists, lawmakers, and even celebrities. People across the country watched in real time as Maya fought back against systemic bias, her courage inspiring thousands. When Mr. Thompson returned, he was accompanied by a senior TSA official named Ms. Patel. Dressed in a crisp suit, Ms. Patel exuded professionalism, though her expression betrayed unease. She extended her hand toward Maya, who hesitated before shaking it briefly. "Captain Johnson," Ms. Patel began, her tone measured. I apologize for the inconvenience you've experienced today. Let's discuss how we can resolve this matter. Inconvenience? Maya echoed, her voice laced with sarcasm. Is that what you call being detained, searched repeatedly, and denied boarding without explanation? Because it feels more like discrimination to me. Ms. Patel winced visibly but maintained her composure. We're reviewing the circumstances surrounding your case, she explained. However, due to security protocols, certain decisions are made based on risk assessments that may not always align with individual expectations. And who decides what constitutes a risk? Maya countered. Who gets to determine which passengers require additional scrutiny? Is it based on data, or is it based on stereotypes? Ms. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced around at the sea of faces surrounding them, all waiting for her response. Finally, she sighed. Captain Johnson, I assure you that we value diversity and inclusivity within our organization. However, there are challenges inherent to maintaining airport security that sometimes lead to misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Maya snapped, her patience wearing thin. That's not what this is. This is systemic racism disguised as policy. And until you address it head-on, incidents like this will keep happening, not just to me, but to others who look like me. Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, eliciting nods and murmurs of agreement. Even some TSA agents standing nearby shifted uncomfortably, unable to deny the truth in what she was saying. Ms. Patel appeared visibly shaken, realizing too late that this wasn't a private issue anymore. It was a public spectacle. Determined to de-escalate the situation, Ms. Patel offered a compromise. If you're willing, we can expedite your travel arrangements. We'll arrange for alternate transportation so you can reach your destination as soon as possible. Maya crossed, her arms considering the proposal, while part of her wanted to refuse outright, to make them feel the full weight of their actions. Another part recognized the practicality of moving forward. Missing her son's graduation entirely wasn't an option. Still, she refused to let them off the hook easily. I'll accept your offer, she said after a pause, but only if you commit to addressing the underlying issues that led to this situation. I want a meeting with TSA leadership to discuss reforms, and I expect transparency, not empty promises. Ms. Patel hesitated, clearly unprepared for such demands. But with dozens of cameras trained on her and the eyes of the nation watching, she had little choice. Agreed, she said finally. We'll arrange everything accordingly. Though relieved to have secured a resolution, Maya knew this was just the beginning. As she followed Ms. Patel to a private office to finalize the details, she couldn't shake the feeling that her fight was far from over. The TSA might try to sweep this incident under the rug, offering apologies and temporary fixes, but Maya was determined to hold them accountable. This wasn't just about her, it was about creating lasting change. Back in the terminal, the crowd slowly dispersed, though the energy remained electric. Conversations buzzed among passengers, many vowing to share Maya's story and support her cause. Social media continued to explode with reactions, amplifying her message to millions. Journalists reached out to airlines, TSA representatives, and advocacy groups, seeking comment on the growing controversy. Lawmakers issued statements condemning discriminatory practices, pledging to investigate further. As Maya sat in the quiet office, finalizing her travel plans, she reflected on the whirlwind of events. What started as a routine trip home had spiraled into something much greater, a catalyst for change. Though exhausted and emotionally drained, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. If she could use her platform to expose injustice and inspire reform, then none of this would have been in vain. Little did she know, the coming days would bring even more challenges and opportunities. The world was watching, and Maya Johnson was ready to rise to the occasion. The days following Captain Maya Johnson's confrontation at the airport were a whirlwind of activity. What had started as a personal ordeal quickly transformed into a national conversation, with her name and story dominating headlines across the country. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying her voice, turning Gershing Stand with Maya and Justice for Black Women into rallying cries for those who believed systemic discrimination needed to be addressed head-on. Yet despite the overwhelming support from strangers online, Maya knew that real change wouldn't happen without action and allies. After securing alternate transportation, Maya finally arrived home just in time for her son's graduation ceremony. Exhausted but determined, she put on a brave face, hugging her family tightly as they celebrated the milestone together. Her son, Jamal, looked at her with pride, though he couldn't fully comprehend the gravity of what she had endured. "Mom," he said softly during a quiet moment, "I saw some of the videos people posted. Are you okay?" Maya smiled, brushing his hair back affectionately. "I'm fine, sweetheart. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." Her resolve only grew stronger as she returned to work the following week. Colleagues greeted her warmly, many expressing admiration for how she handled herself during the incident. Some shared their own stories of facing bias both inside and outside the military, reinforcing Maya's belief that systemic issues ran deep. One senior officer, General Carter, pulled her aside after a morning briefing. "Captain Johnson," he said earnestly, "what happened to you was unacceptable. If there's anything command can do to support you, whether it's legal assistance or advocacy, you have my word." Grateful for the offer, Maya accepted his help, knowing that navigating the complexities of bureaucracy required strategic alliances. With General Carter's backing, she began reaching out to civil rights organizations, lawyers, and policymakers who specialized in combating discrimination. Each meeting brought new insights and possibilities, fueling her determination to turn her experience into meaningful reform. Among her growing circle of supporters was Sarah, the journalist who had approached her at the airport. True to her word, Sarah published an in-depth article detailing Maya's encounter with TSA officials, highlighting not only the injustice but also the broader implications of racial profiling in public spaces. The piece went viral almost instantly, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Readers flooded comment sections with messages of solidarity, while others shared similar experiences of being targeted because of their race, religion, or gender. One such message came from a woman named Lisa, who recounted being stopped repeatedly at airports despite traveling frequently for work. "Every time I fly, I feel like I'm guilty until proven innocent," Lisa wrote. "Your story gave me hope that maybe we can change things." Encouraged by these responses, Maya decided to take her fight to the next level. She reached out to Lisa and other individuals who had faced similar treatment, inviting them to join forces in advocating for policy changes. Together, they formed a coalition called Travelers United for Equality, TRUE, dedicated to raising awareness about discriminatory practices and pushing for legislative reforms. Their mission was simple yet powerful: ensure that everyone, regardless of background, could travel safely and with dignity. As TRUE gained momentum, so did public pressure on government agencies and private corporations to address long-standing biases. Lawmakers convened hearings to investigate allegations of racial profiling within TSA operations, calling experts, activists, and victims, including Maya, to testify. During her appearance before Congress, Maya delivered a poignant speech that resonated deeply with listeners. "Discrimination doesn't always come in the form of slurs or outright hostility," she explained. "Sometimes it hides behind policies and procedures that seem neutral on the surface, but disproportionately impact marginalized communities. When someone like me, a decorated officer who has sworn to protect this nation, is treated as a threat simply because of my skin color, it sends a dangerous message. It tells us that our contributions don't matter, that our humanity is secondary to baseless assumptions." Her words struck a chord, earning applause from lawmakers and advocates alike. Senators pledged to introduce legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within TSA protocols, while representatives vowed to hold oversight hearings regularly. Airlines also came under scrutiny, with several executives issuing public apologies and promising to review their own security measures. Meanwhile, Maya continued leveraging her platform to inspire others. She appeared on talk shows, participated in panel discussions, and spoke at community events, using every opportunity to amplify the voices of those often ignored. Her efforts earned her recognition not only as a trailblazer in the military, but also as a champion for social justice. Yet amid all the accolades and attention, Maya remained grounded. She understood that progress wouldn't happen overnight. Dismantling deeply entrenched systems required patience, persistence, and collective effort. Every setback reminded her of the challenges ahead, but each victory reinforced her belief that change was possible. One particularly memorable moment occurred when a young girl approached her after a speaking engagement. Clutching a notebook, filled with sketches and notes, the child shyly asked, "Are you really a superhero?" Maya laughed gently, kneeling down to meet her eye to eye. "No, sweetie," she replied. "I'm just someone trying to make the world a little fairer for everyone. But if you ever see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. That's how we make a difference." The girl nodded thoughtfully, scribbling furiously in her notebook before skipping away. Watching her go, Maya felt a surge of hope. This movement wasn't just about exposing flaws in the system, it was about empowering future generations to demand better. By standing firm in the face of adversity, she was planting seeds of resilience and courage that would grow far beyond her lifetime. Back at home, Maya spent evenings strategizing with her team, brainstorming ways to keep the momentum going. They launched petitions, organized rallies, and collaborated with artists to create murals honoring victims of discrimination. Each project brought them closer to their ultimate goal, creating a world where no one had to endure what Maya had endured. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Maya drew strength from the growing network of allies surrounding her. From seasoned activists to ordinary citizens inspired by her courage, people from all walks of life rallied behind her cause. Together, they proved that even in moments of despair, unity could spark transformation. And so, as Maya prepared for the next phase of her journey, testifying in court, lobbying for policy changes, and continuing to share her story, she did so with unwavering determination. Her battle against systemic bias was far from over, but she knew she wasn't fighting alone. With every step forward, she moved closer to a future where equality wasn't just an ideal, but a reality. Captain Maya Johnson's fight against systemic discrimination had evolved into a full-blown crusade. What began as a personal ordeal at the airport now stood as a symbol of resistance, inspiring countless others to join her cause. Yet despite the growing momentum behind her movement, Maya knew that true justice required more than public outrage. It demanded accountability, reform, and action. And so, she prepared herself for the next phase of her journey, taking legal action. With the help of Sarah, the journalist who had documented her story, Maya connected with a team of civil rights attorneys eager to represent her in a lawsuit against both the TSA and the airline involved in her mistreatment. The lawyers, led by a seasoned advocate named Rachel Monroe, laid out their strategy during an initial meeting. "We're not just suing them for damages," Rachel explained firmly. "This is about exposing the flaws in their policies and forcing them to implement meaningful changes." Maya nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I don't want this to end with me getting compensation or an apology," she said. "If we can use my case to push for systemic reforms, better training programs, stricter oversight mechanisms, transparency in decision-making, then maybe no one else will have to go through what I did." The legal process was grueling, involving mountains of paperwork, depositions, and painstaking research. Maya spent hours recounting every detail of her experience, from the dismissive glances of TSA agents to the humiliation of being denied boarding without explanation. Her testimony painted a vivid picture of how bias could seep into even the most routine interactions, leaving lasting scars on those subjected to it. As word spread about the lawsuit, media coverage intensified. News outlets featured interviews with Maya, highlighting her courage and determination. Social media platforms buzzed with updates as supporters rallied around hashtags like Justice for Maya and Doizarsh End Travel Bias. Celebrities and influencers joined the conversation, amplifying her message to millions. One actor tweeted, "What happened to Captain Johnson isn't just unfair, it's unacceptable. We need real change, not empty promises." The public outcry put immense pressure on the TSA and the airline to respond. At first, they attempted to downplay the incident, issuing vague statements about isolated occurrences and misunderstandings. But when internal documents surfaced revealing patterns of racial profiling within TSA operations, the narrative shifted dramatically. Emails and memos showed that certain protocols disproportionately targeted Black travelers, particularly women, raising serious questions about institutional racism. Lawmakers seized the opportunity to demand answers. Congressional hearings resumed, this time with greater urgency. Witnesses included not only victims of discriminatory practices, but also whistleblowers from within the TSA itself. A former agent named Marcus testified under oath, describing how supervisors often encouraged officers to single out passengers based on appearance rather than actual risk factors. His revelations shocked the nation, sparking widespread calls for immediate reform. Amid the chaos, Maya found solace in the growing coalition of allies standing beside her. Travelers United for Equality, TRUE, continued to gain traction, organizing protests outside major airports and lobbying lawmakers for stricter regulations. Volunteers distributed flyers, held workshops, and launched online campaigns aimed at educating the public about systemic bias. Their efforts culminated in a massive rally in Washington, D.C., where thousands gathered to demand justice, not just for Maya, but for all marginalized communities affected by discriminatory policies. Standing on stage at the rally, Maya addressed the crowd with heartfelt gratitude. "When I walked into that airport months ago, I never imagined this would happen," she admitted, her voice steady but emotional. "But look at us now. Look at what we've built together. This isn't just my fight anymore. It's ours. And as long as we stand united, there's nothing we can't achieve." Her words electrified the audience, drawing cheers and applause. Among the attendees were families who had faced similar injustices, activists fighting for broader civil rights, and even some TSA employees who believed in reform. For many, the event served as a turning point, a moment when collective anger transformed into collective hope. Back in court, Maya's legal team presented damning evidence linking TSA practices to systemic racism. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological toll of racial profiling, while data analysts demonstrated how certain demographics were consistently flagged for additional scrutiny. The defense argued that these measures were necessary for national security, but their claims rang hollow in light of the overwhelming proof against them. Finally, after months of deliberation, the judge ruled in Maya's favor. In a landmark decision, the court ordered the TSA and the airline to pay substantial damages to Maya while mandating sweeping reforms across their operations. These included mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, independent audits of screening procedures, and the establishment of a hotline for reporting discriminatory behavior. Additionally, Congress passed legislation requiring increased transparency and accountability in airport security protocols. While the verdict marked a significant victory, Maya refused to rest on her laurels. She understood that laws alone couldn't eradicate deeply ingrained prejudices. Cultural shifts were equally important. To address this, she partnered with educational institutions to develop curricula focused on diversity and inclusion, ensuring that future generations grew up aware of the harm caused by stereotypes and biases. At home, Maya reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful day at the airport. The journey had been exhausting, testing her patience and resolve at every turn. Yet it had also brought unexpected blessings, new friendships, renewed purpose, and a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. As she looked at photos of her son's graduation, the very event she had almost missed, she realized that none of this would have been possible without the support of those who believed in her. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Jamal joined her, his expression thoughtful. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "do you think things will really change? Like for good?" Maya smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Change takes time, sweetheart. It's not always easy, and there will be setbacks along the way. But if enough people care, if enough people keep pushing, we can make the world a better place. That's what I'm fighting for. Jamal nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The battle wasn't over, but progress had been made. With each step forward, she moved closer to a future where equality wasn't just a dream, but a reality. And though challenges lay ahead, Maya faced them with unshakable determination. After all, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. The courtroom lights dimmed as Captain Maya Johnson stood before the judge, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and relief. Months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and relentless advocacy had finally led to this moment. A verdict that would not only define her personal journey, but also set a precedent for millions of travelers across the nation. The judge's voice rang out clearly, delivering a decision that sent waves of hope rippling through the room. In light of the evidence presented, he declared, this court finds in favor of Captain Maya Johnson. The defendant organizations are ordered to implement comprehensive reforms addressing systemic bias within their operations. Cheers erupted from the gallery, where supporters had gathered to witness history being made. Friends, family members, fellow advocates, and even strangers who had followed Maya's story online clapped and embraced one another. For Maya, however, the victory felt bittersweet. It wasn't just about winning a case. It was about acknowledging the pain endured by countless others whose voices hadn't been heard. As she stepped down from the stand, tears welled up in her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away. There was still work to be done. In the weeks following the ruling, Maya became a household name, celebrated not only for her resilience, but also for her unwavering commitment to justice. News outlets hailed her as a trailblazer, while social media buzzed with admiration for her courage. Yet, despite the accolades, Maya remained grounded. She knew that real change didn't happen overnight. It required sustained effort and vigilance. With renewed determination, she threw herself into ensuring that the reforms mandated by the court were implemented effectively. One of her first priorities was working closely with TSA leadership to design anti-bias training programs for agents nationwide. Drawing on her own experiences, Maya collaborated with psychologists, educators, and civil rights experts to create curricula that challenged stereotypes and fostered empathy. During one such session, a young TSA agent approached her afterward, visibly moved. "Thank you, Captain Johnson," he said earnestly. "I never realized how my actions could affect someone until I heard your story. I promise to do better." Maya smiled warmly, patting him on the shoulder. "That's all any of us can ask for, to try our best and keep learning." Her efforts extended beyond airports too. Recognizing that discrimination wasn't confined to travel security, Maya expanded Travelers United for Equality, TRUE, to address biases in other public spaces, schools, workplaces, and healthcare facilities among them. Through partnerships with grassroots organizations, TRUE launched initiatives aimed at empowering marginalized communities to advocate for themselves. Workshops, mentorship programs, and resource hubs sprang up across the country, fueled by donations and volunteer support. As her influence grew, Maya found herself invited to speak at prestigious events around the world. From TED Talks to international conferences on human rights, she used every platform to share her vision of a more inclusive society. Her speeches resonated deeply, blending personal anecdotes with calls to action. At one event, she addressed an audience of thousands, saying, "Discrimination thrives in silence. It hides behind policies, procedures, and excuses. But when we shine a light on it, when we refuse to look away, we take away its power. Together, we can build a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." Her words inspired many, including a young girl named Zara, who reached out after hearing Maya speak. In a heartfelt letter, Zara wrote, "You've shown me that no matter how hard things get, I should never give up fighting for what's right." One day, I want to be like you. Encouraged by such messages, Maya began mentoring young activists, nurturing the next generation of changemakers. Meanwhile, Maya continued to honor those who had supported her along the way. She reunited with Sarah, the journalist whose initial coverage had ignited widespread awareness, to co-author a memoir chronicling her journey, titled Through the Checkpoint, A Fight for Justice. The book became an instant bestseller, praised for its raw honesty and inspiring message. Proceeds from sales went directly to funding True's initiatives, ensuring that Maya's legacy would endure long after the headlines faded. At home, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be for someone whose face now graced magazine covers. Jamal, now a college freshman, proudly introduced his mother to classmates as the woman who changed air travel. Though Maya chuckled at the title, she couldn't deny the profound impact her fight had made, not just on systems and policies, but on hearts and minds. On a crisp autumn morning, Maya attended her son's university orientation, watching him navigate campus with confidence. As they strolled past groups of students laughing and chatting, she reflected on how far they'd come since that chaotic day at the airport. Back then, she had feared missing his graduation entirely. Now, she stood beside him as he embarked on a new chapter of his life. "Mom," Jamal said suddenly, breaking her reverie, "do you think people will remember what you did years from now?" Maya paused, considering the question carefully. "Maybe," she replied thoughtfully. "But whether they remember me or not isn't what matters. What matters is that we planted seeds of change, seeds that will grow because of the work so many people have put in. Someday maybe you'll tell your kids about this and they'll understand why fairness and equality are worth fighting for." Jamal nodded, smiling. "I think I'd like that." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues over the city skyline, Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment wash over her. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she faced them with unshakable resolve. After all, she wasn't just standing for herself anymore. She was standing for everyone who deserved to move freely, live fearlessly, and dream boldly. And so Captain Maya Johnson walked forward, head held high, ready to embrace whatever came next. Her battle against systemic bias had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined, proving that even in moments of despair, resilience could spark meaningful change. For Maya, the journey wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about paving a path for others to follow. And as she looked toward the future, she knew one thing for certain. The fight for justice was far from over, but together, anything was possible.